Welcome to War Room, the official podcast of the U.S. Army War College online journal, graciously supported by the Army War College Foundation. Please join the conversation at warroom.armywarcollege.edu. We hope you enjoy the program.
Make sure not to miss a single podcast and subscribe to A Better Peace, the War Room podcast, at iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite subscription service. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of the U.S. Army War College, U.S. Army, or Department of Defense.
Welcome to A Better Peace, the War Room podcast. I'm Ron Granieri, Professor of History at the Department of National Security and Strategy at the U.S. Army War College and podcast editor of the War Room. It's a pleasure to have you with us. The Army War College teaches future strategic leaders how to think strategically. That apparent tautology reflects the complexity of our task. Our students will take up staff and leadership positions at the highest level, and thus need to develop the skills and knowledge necessary to develop and carry out strategic plans. That also means we are always looking for new ways to cultivate those skills, a project that itself involves collaboration between students and faculty. Our guests today are three students in the class of 2023 at the Army War College, participants in the Carlisle Scholars Program, which encourages its members to pursue specialized and client-based research. These students are completing development of a new strategy game to help students practice the give and take required to build, develop, and carry out strategic plans. At A Better Peace, we are always eager to showcase the work of our students and faculty, so we are very pleased to welcome them to this conversation. And they are Lieutenant Colonel Giovanni Corrado, Ian Hopper, and Colonel Kent W. Park. Lieutenant Colonel Giovanni Corrado is an Italian Army airborne officer who started his military career in 1997 at the Italian Military Academy. He has served in a variety of command and staff positions and has attended the Italian Army Staff College, as well as the Command and General Staff College and School of Advanced Military Studies in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, before coming to the War College. In the last year before attending the U.S. Army War College, he was a section head at the Italian Army G2. Mr. Ian Hopper is a Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State. Most recently, he was the Director of the Office of Iraq Affairs. Ian served in Baghdad from 2019 to 2020 as Consul General, and he previously served as the State Department's Supervisory Regional Consular Officer based in Frankfurt, Germany. Since joining the Foreign Service in 2002, he has served in Jordan, India, Togo, the Philippines, as well as several Washington-based positions, and in September, he will become the Consul General in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Colonel Kent W. Park is a 1999 graduate of the United States Military Academy. He has served in a variety of command and staff positions in Korea and also in Iraq. Colonel Park attended the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and earned a master's degree in public policy there before returning to the U.S. Military Academy to teach American politics in the Department of Social Sciences. And we are delighted to have the three of you with us today. Welcome, Giovanni Corrado, Ian Hopper, and Kent Park.
Thank you, Ron.
Morning, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
So let's start with a basic question. What made you decide to make a game?
Well, I'll start with that. During our year with the Carlisle Scholars Program, we examined historical case studies to learn about how some of these strategies were formulated and implemented. And a lot of times at the end of the day, we would be walking home and we would shake our heads and wonder what were they thinking, right? So some of these decisions, some of the bad decisions that were being made. And these are really smart people. These are some people that we actually know. And how is it that they made such decisions? Was it because they didn't understand some of the basic understanding of strategy, like ends, ways, and means? And really the answer is no. And this is where our faculty instructor, Dr. Tino Perez, would pound the desk and emphasize in classroom that strategy is performance. In other words, he emphasizes that strategy is not merely an academic discipline that you study. It requires one to actually do something within the complex and messy realities of a real world. And this is why it's relatively easy to develop a wonderful, comprehensive, coherent strategy in a sterile isolated classroom, but it becomes very difficult and very different environment out in the real world. And so this reminded me actually, as I was teaching at West Point, we did something called congressional simulation exercise. And as we were teaching American politics, one of the things I noticed with the questions that the cadets were asking is that, they really had just a schoolhouse rock superficial understanding of how American politics actually works. They didn't really understand the complexity and how difficult it is sometimes. And this can be problematic for future military officers. So we wanted to bring out some experiential learning to the classroom. So that's really where it started. And we used the basic principles that we learned from running these multiple iterations with the cadets at West Point through the congressional simulation exercise, and we applied it to the strategy simulation exercise that we developed.
That's great. And had any of the three of you had any experience in game development? So Kent, if you use them in your classes at West Point, that's one thing. But had any of you had any experience in developing a game from scratch before?
No, in my case, no. So for me, the motivation for joining Kent and Ian in this research, I would say, was exactly that. So I didn't have any kind of experience. So I want to challenge myself and trying something new. At the end, it was a very exciting experience.
I have had some development experience. I'm an avid gamer, but also in consular affairs, which is my specialty in the State Department, a lot of our work is dedicated to helping American citizens overseas. So just like the DoD does wargaming, we do crisis development, crisis planning, and that involves a lot of simulation exercises too. So we would develop these simulation exercises to simulate, say, a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, to try to prepare our officers for the kind of obstacles that they may face in that, whether that's bureaucratic obstacles or personal, emotional things that they have to go through to try to prepare them as much as you can for what could be a very traumatic experience. So I've developed a number of different simulations and games to do that. So we wanted to try to balance this effort to be curriculum based. We wanted people to learn, but also we wanted people to have fun. So it was a constant tension during our game development process between, well, we have to get these concepts in, we have to teach them about this, but we also need to keep them engaged, and it needs to make sense in a gamified environment.
You see, and I like the way you put that, because of course, people have been trying to teach people stuff for a long time, but the idea of using games and simulations that require this sort of iteration between students and instructors, but also among students themselves, is clearly a growing field. We've had several podcasts on various aspects of gaming here. So for our audience, can you give us the thumbnail description of what gameplay is like? First of all, does your game have a name? So it's not Squad Leader, or for people my age and older will know exactly what I'm referring to when I say that. It's not Risk. What's the name of the game, and how do you play it?
Right. There's no counters, and you won't be trying to seize Kamchatka. Or if you do, you've definitely gone off the rails as far as your intent. That was not our intent. Might be fun though.
Kamchatka is a dagger pointed at the heart of Sakhalin Island. Come on.
No, right. Just hide in Australia. So we've got some gamers here. So no, it is. We call it a strategy simulation exercise. It's got kind of a bland name because we talked early on, and this is another gamer reference. We talked early on about the concept of Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't want to out anybody, but there are a number of us amongst our group, not 100%, but a number of us who have some experience with Dungeons and Dragons. And if you've played it, or if you're at least, vaguely familiar with it, you know that there are a set of rules, there are concepts in Dungeons and Dragons that are universal. Whether that's the way you do combat, or the way you explore, or the way you carry things, or different classes of people, or all of that. And then there are adventures or campaigns that you can tack on to that. So we intentionally made this game such that we have a set of core rules, core concepts, and that's the phases that you go through as you're trying to develop policy. But you can mix and match different scenarios. So our scenario that we developed that comes with the game for free is a Taiwan simulation. So we have 3 main actor groups. China, Taiwan, and the United States. And the scenario is very, very brief. It's just that a new government in Taiwan has been elected with a platform of declaring independence or having an independence referendum. So that referendum hasn't happened yet. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but that election has taken place and that expectation is there. So the interesting part of our game, though, is that you do play within your actor groups, within your countries, but really you're playing as individuals. So we give each of them bios of who they are. So in the standard game, there's four per actor group. So you may be the Minister of Defense or the Minister of Trade or some sort of cabinet or quasi-cabinet official within your country. There is no executive. You are not the president or the chairman. And we intentionally did that because we thought that, again, game-wise, it would be there would be all kinds of dynamics that could take place if one person could simply overrule the others, even though we did talk about, well, if you defy the executive, you might find a window, then fall out of it. Or get impeached or whatever. But we ended up not going that route. And it's 4 different people who have different biographical backgrounds. We've got whole written biographies of them. And very different views on the crisis at hand. Some of them are more hawkish, some of them are more dovish, but they all have reasons why they are who they are. And they have what they would prefer as their crisis and regional goals for this crisis. And then during the process of it, they internalize their own identification, and then they get to the country level, and they have to develop what the country's policy is going to be. And then they go to ally negotiations. So U.S. and Taiwan have to negotiate. We bring the UN in there, so they have an opportunity to get a UN Security Council or a UN General Assembly mandate for whatever their policy is. And then finally, they free negotiate among all the actors. And then at the end, you are graded, you are scored by what the final outcomes are vis-a-vis your own personal ends. So there are people who are going to have to do the right thing for their country, but might, quote unquote, lose. And then there are others who, the ends probably turned into war, but they did what they wanted to do for their constituents. So it was very intentional to try to show how policy is made at many different levels: bureaucratic levels, sub-bureaucratic levels, alliance levels, and finally show how policy can be developed in such a way that maybe it's not the most ideal or the most beneficial as a country, but this is the messy sausage-making way it actually happens. So it really does match reality in that way.
And am I correct then, listening to your description of the gameplay, that obviously there's no 20-sided dice? Sorry, I have to make a reference.
No, there is
alas. Not. I mean, I guess everybody can get one of their own if they just want to have one. But there's and so are we talking about turns? Are we talking about sort of periods where, and then
yes,
with free negotiation periods in between, and then we come together and we see sort of the result of those negotiations?
Yes, we call them phases. And they are timed in that you can do certain things at certain phases. Timing has been a big issue in our betas. Some people like it, some people really do not. And then there are currency that people can use, what we call political capital, which is basically the effort that a country has in order to pressure another country or another individual to do something. So, for example, saying that you will do military exercises in another country may be positive or negative political capital, maybe a positive or negative impetus to change one's policy, or Taiwan putting a microprocessor plant in Kansas. So even though we have these political capital points, and they are just points, we do make sure that that the players put a name to it. We try to make it realistic, and they can make up whatever they want, but the idea is you are actually doing something in order to bring that pressure.
And at the end, do we count up the points? How do we decide who
absolutely
wins?
do.
Absolutely do. Okay, yeah. And so I was trying to do the math in my head. How many players are we talking about total?
Ideally 12.
12.
Although we've scaled it down several times, and there are ways we put the instructor's notes to scale it up as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, good. Kent, you look like you want to say something. Go ahead, man.
One thing I wanted to add about the simulation is, as you know, it is a simulation because it is not reality. So our focus for the simulation is the actor interaction, the negotiation aspect of it. So we had to purposefully simplify the actual strategy. So it's not about coming up with a detailed and very quote unquote good strategy. It's about having 3 strategy options that you prefer out of those options, and then negotiating, trying to figure out what the other actors prefer, which options that they are trying to advocate for, trying to understand why, and then figuring out how to gain alliances or other people to join your what you are advocating, and having that interaction amongst themselves. That is the key part that we wanted to emphasize with this exercise.
Right. Okay, great. Joe, please.
We, during the development of the game, we also focused on the effort that the instructor had to put into organizing and running the exercise. We started with a package of some 25 pages for each player, and after several refinements, we ended up with only 4 pages. So from an organizational standpoint, the simulation exercise can be set up in a very short period and requires only a little preparation with an explanatory briefing that the students read at home the day before the exercise.
That was going to be my next question, is how much homework is required to set this up before you do it? So you could theoretically divide people up the day before, hand them their information, and then gather the next day in your groups and start it. What's the, I know you talked about that there's timing. How long is the game designed to take?
Yeah, so this has been an issue with some of our betas because we've done different time frames.
Right.
I think what we've determined is that you can certainly expand it out as long as you'd like, and the longer you expand out the times and the gaps between the phases, it allows for a higher nuance of negotiation. So in an ideal world, we would say 5 to 6 hours. So a school day, perhaps. If it's shorter than that, then we would encourage educators to break it up over several days. We did do a number of simulations that were on the 4 hour or less range, and we really had to accelerate some of the phases such that it was nearly impossible to try to, even though it's not required, to try to accomplish something during a particular phase. And that led to some frustration on the students' parts as well as the facilitators' parts. So like Giovanni said, we really wanted to make this as plug and play as easy as possible for both the instructors and the students.
Mm-hmm. And who have your betas been? With whom have you played this game so far?
So we played this game within our seminar.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first beta. And then we played also with the students of the elective of Wargaming for strategic leaders. So these are the 2 betas that we have run so far.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very, very useful in refining all the rules and streamlining the process, because as Ian said, we want the game, the simulation exercise, to be as smooth as possible.
Right. And so I'm guessing, so the Carlisle Scholars Seminar, that's what, 16 of you. And so the 3 of you doing the management. So that means you had a group of about 13. How many people were in the elective on strategic gaming for strategic leaders?
So there were 5 in that seminar, but they added another person in.
Okay.
So we had 6. So it was 2 players per actor group, which is challenging to do, but I think it provided good lessons for us that it is possible to do. It certainly works, but ideally you want more players.
Right, Kent?
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that we're not quite done. We have the actual prototype. We wish we had more time to conduct more beta tests and refine. Again, from the previous experience, one of the things that I learned is every iteration that you learn, you receive feedback, and you're able to refine the process. So if I think back to the first sort of the congressional simulation exercise and the final one that we got to, there were a lot of changes that we made. And so the hope or what the expectation in the future is that there will be a couple more iterations that are run through, whether it's the Carlisle Scholars Program or other seminars within the Army War College, and the process and this game itself gets refined further.
Roger. Well, and related to that, could you imagine scaling it bigger? Because this is what I'm trying to think is, a War College seminar is about 15, 16 people. A college class might be 30 people, right? Or you might be looking at, I don't know, 50 people. I mean, how big could you imagine this getting and still being able to be done? Or if you get to larger groups, would you tell somebody who had a larger classroom, well, break the classroom into different games and subdivide that way? What do you think right now?
I think we can go very large. Again, just from the previous one that we did, we had hundreds of cadets. We had basically the Senate and the Congress. We had the superintendent or the dean actually play the president coming in and addressing the joint Congress. Something similar could absolutely happen within the Army War College. The different seminars themselves could be actor groups representing different countries. There could be any different types of cross-boundary issues that we are facing globally. Whether it is anything related to the global climate change or some kind of natural disaster, another pandemic, things that we can develop that would involve a very large group of players playing different roles.
Another thing we talked about is, we have right now the players in a room or in a couple rooms, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you had a much larger group, it would be very easy to put this online, use blogs, use websites to post the information and really have fun with it. Really use, because we have a scenario option that happens a lot where people have to give press statements.
Oh, okay.
And they can be as static or bombastic as they would like. They don't have to be truthful. They don't have to really say what it is that their policy objectives are. So they could put those online. They could tweet if they wanted to. And it could be asynchronous.
Right.
So you could post them whenever you'd like. So it really does allow for that flexibility of doing it with the whole 300 plus academic class.
Sure. Although I of course am shocked at the idea that any major power would make policy through tweets. Imagine living in such a world.
Anyway. You're gonna get crickets from the State Department on that one.
That's fair. Giovanni, please, you wanted to say something too.
So for us, during these 2 months, the most important objective was to understand and define specific mechanics in the game that incentivize specific behaviors or prevent some specific behaviors. So once those mechanics are clear, and they are clear right now, you can scale the project up and down as you prefer.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I am talking about games. I mean, there are a lot of human activities that are more fun to actually do than to talk about. So but I'm glad we were able to get a sense of the gameplay. But I wanted to shift the discussion just a little bit and ask how the three of you felt this. The game development, how it fit in with your experience in Carlisle Scholars, right? We people who from outside the War College may or may not know that our students generally are divided into 16-person seminars. Carlisle Scholars is a seminar whose curriculum is structured slightly differently from the other seminars, involves this extra research component. But how did first of all, what led you to the Carlisle Scholars Program? And second of all, in the Carlisle Scholars Program, how did developing this game become the thing that you chose to do? And I'll take you in, we'll go reverse alphabetical order. So we'll start with you, Kent.
All right. So I actually did not know a whole lot about the Carlisle Scholars Program. I just received an email from Tino with some description about it. And I was intrigued. Just based on my previous military education program, PMEs, I did want something a little bit more challenging. So I interviewed with them and and I got selected. In terms of the actual Carlisle Scholars Program, you mentioned earlier about the different types of pedagogical development that have been happening recently. So going all the way back to the Socratic method to the classic Bloom's taxonomy of learning. In Carlisle Scholars Program, I think they are pushing in towards what's currently known, or what they're saying about high impact practices or high impact teaching that people have been researching, and it has different principles, best practices in terms of how you get into teaching information that will be lasting. And I really believe that they are really getting after high performance expectations, extended periods where students are engaged. Experiential learning, we have these series of 2 days of going through, as mentioned earlier, studying case studies, and then in small groups, really doing a deep dive into what actually happened, what were they trying to do, and having that type of learning experience was fantastic. And then after that classroom learning that we did for the first semester, during the second semester, we take all that information and now we're actually practicing it. So we go out and get a client. As an example, I've been working with the selective service system, so the actual director of the selective service agency, to talk about modernizing the conscription, the draft, and some of the ways in which they are still relevant in the current strategic environment. And again, being able to bring all the things that I learned from the previous classroom learning into actual practice has really solidified and made things concrete in terms of the concepts and theories that I learned previously.
That's great. Thanks, Kent. Ian, how about you? And also, while I have you here, as the saying goes, what's it like being a Foreign Service officer at the U.S. Army War College?
It's great.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for this conversation. Thank you, Ian.
Keep it brief. No, I guess that dovetails into what I was actually going to say about the Carlisle Scholars Program. And I think that one of the things, other than the freedom of time and focus that we had to really dive into, both during the curriculum and then outside of the traditional curriculum, to focus on the kind of issues that motivated us. Like Kent was talking about the selective service system. And we talked about recruitment issues so much over the past year, because it really was all-encompassing and interesting to all of us in our various agencies. But not only am I a Foreign Service officer, but I was the only civilian in our seminar.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, and I have to say, other than the fact of having to learn or try to learn a whole nother set of acronyms, many of which are actually the same as our acronyms, but stand for something different, which is awesome. But people were great about sitting next to me and going, "No, that doesn't mean that. That's different letters." They were really welcoming to ideas that came out, but also to hearing my impressions of DoD. I've worked with DoD quite a bit over my career. Not all of us do. We all have varied experiences with it, but they were very self-critical and self-analyzing, and I think we all have been that, not just with our agencies, but with U.S. policy in general, and with the pedagogical method that we used. We and our instructors would attest to this maybe fondly. We changed a lot of the curriculum on the fly of what we were studying because we had an interest in something else, and they were so great to adapt that for us and allow us to study that and also teach each other what we came in with. We have such an interesting and diverse background of operational and policy experience and different domains, different geographical regions. It was really like a We Are the World concert in there. Another old reference for everybody.
Kids, ask your parents.
I know. But it really was great and diverse to be able to have that. And yeah, I felt welcome and I would definitely encourage any other State Department official, hint, to both attend the Army War College and specifically the Carlisle Scholars Program.
That's very good, and I'm delighted to hear that. I'm also always curious, right? As a civilian academic who's only been at the War College now for 4 years, right? I'm still learning the acronyms too. I do have the advantage that I didn't learn a whole bunch of other acronyms that I now have to reconfigure. But while we're on the subject of language and the idea of being when we are the world, Giovanni, an Italian officer in the at the U.S. Army War College, right? That we bring international fellows, of course, every year. But what was it like for you in Carlisle Scholars, and why did you choose Carlisle Scholars?
Well, it was a great experience for me. I had previous educational experience in the States, in the U.S. military. I attended CGSC and SAMS, so this was the further step, I would say, in my education. So the experience was great. Such as Ian, I felt very, very welcome among the scholars here at the War College. And I knew very little about the Scholars Program itself. I knew only two things. The first one was that it was challenging. And the second one was it was research heavy as a program. So when I knew those two things, I said that's my place. That's where I want to go. And I applied for that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And as an intelligence officer, right, reading a lot of stuff, this does not scare you, right? You do this, all the time, right? Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have all three of you here. We could, I'm always interested in carrying on these conversations, but I think we're just about out of time for today. We're going to try to put some information about you and about the game in the show notes if we can. But for now, thanks so much for coming on A Better Peace to talk about your project and your experience here. Thanks, Ian Hopper. Thanks, Kent Park. Thanks, Giovanni Corrado, for being here on A Better Peace.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
And thanks to all of you for listening in. Please send us your comments on this program and all the programs. Send us your suggestions for future programs. We're always interested in hearing from you. Please take a moment to subscribe to A Better Peace, because you should want to subscribe to A Better Peace on your podcatcher of choice. And after you have done so, please take a moment again and rate and review this podcast, because rating and reviewing is how other people can find out about it, so that we can continue to grow the community for conversations like this one. And even though this conversation is over, we hope to welcome you to the next one. And so until next time, from the War Room, I'm Ron Granieri.
And that concludes our program. Thank you for listening. The views expressed in this podcast reflect those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of the U.S. Army or the Department of Defense. Let us know what you think. Provide us your feedback, comments, or suggestions through our webpage at warroom.armywarcollege.edu. And have a great day.